All right, CNT125 Routing Protocol Lab. We just got done configuring the basic config on both of our routers, our interface config. We're now going to add our first routing protocol. So before I even do that, if I do an exit here and I do a show, show IP route, what I'll see is let me make this a little wider. Here's the routing table. It basically knows the two networks that are attached, the 32 and the 48. It knows those two are there because I'm on the 4221. It knows these two networks are there. It does not know about this one. It has not learned it from anything. So if we put a routing protocol on, it can actually talk to the other router and learn what networks it's attached to. So once I do that, then I would actually have connectivity from this computer over to this network. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to add a routing protocol on here so these two routers can learn the networks that are out there. So we're going to start with the distance vector, old school. This is legacy. So we'll start with this one and look at this one, and then we'll move on to link state and then hybrid. So here we'll do config T. We're going to do router. If I do a question mark here, these are all the protocols I could use. So I'm going to use RIP, and then we'll use OSPF, and then we'll use EIGRP. So we'll do router RIP, and now we need to plug in the version we're going to use. We're going to use the old school version 1. And then we'll plug in the networks. Now, the networks are the networks that are attached to it that are going to participate in routing updates. So to be thorough, I'm actually going to plug all three subnets in, 16.0, 32.0, 48.0. Really, the only two I really need are these two that are attached to this router. But I'll be thorough and plug all three in, and I'll do that for both routers, just to kind of keep consistent here. 170, 70, 16.0, 170, 70, 32.0, 170, 70, 48.0. And that is one of the reasons we put the subnets on our map. There they are. There's the three networks that are out there. I'll say exit, exit. If I do a show run, here is my router interfaces that I configured previously, and here is my routing protocol RIP configuration. Now you'll notice that I plugged in the three subnets and it defaulted to 170.70. It goes, oh, yeah, all those subnets belong to this, so I'm just going to pay attention to this network. That's what it did. It summarized those. So that is not a mistake. We didn't make a mistake. It's just the router understood we subnetted, so it's maintaining only that network in there. All right, I'm going to do a copy run start on this now since we have it up and running. I'm going to console into my 2811. So let me move my console cable to the 2011 router, and we're going to repeat that same process on this guy. Exit. If I do a show run, we'll see over here we don't have the protocol config. There's my interfaces, but I don't have the routing protocol config. It's not there. So config T, router RIP, version 1, old school, network 170, 70, 16.0, 32.0, 48.0, exit, exit. If I do a show run, again, there's my interface addresses. Here is my routing protocol config. Right there it is. Again, it summarized all those subnets down to the 170.70 network. It understood what we're doing. So I will do a copy run start on this guy as well. All right, so I have those in there. I did a save on both. What I want to do now is make sure, do I have blinking link lights on all my router and switch ports I'm using? If I do, great, keep moving. If I don't, at the end of this lab, I have a troubleshooting area. Let me scroll down there and show you. I'm going to scroll down here. After the submission page, I have a troubleshooting area. If you don't see link lights, these are the things to try. Check that your cables are in the right port. As I always say, be 1,000,000% sure. Don't assume, double check. After you do that on your routers, do stuff like a show run, and this actually would apply to a switch too. Do a show run, and make sure that under the interfaces, I don't see the word shutdown. If I look down here, I see the word shutdown, that port is off. It's okay, we're not using that one. But up here, the ones we are using, if I see shutdown, I know it's not turned on, and I would need to issue the no shutdown command. Those are the things to check, and then look at your ports again and make sure they're on. If they're still not on, that's when you ask for help, okay? So that's your first troubleshooting thing. You scroll back up here to our RIP area again. The next thing we're going to do is make sure our workstations are connected in. Now, in between the last two podcasts, I actually took my left computer and plugged it into this switch and gave it this IP and subnet mask. Here it is right here. If I do an IP config, I'll scroll up. There is the IP subnet mask, IP subnet mask and default router config, default gateway config. So that has been done. Do the same thing on the right PC, the other PC at your table. And I did. I plugged that into in this case, the bottom switch. Made sure its IP subnet mask and gateway are right. So make sure those are done. Once that is done, verify with IP config. Now try to ping your default gateway. That's ideally what I want to do. I want to try to ping the default gateway. So for this PC, it's 170.70.16.1. I want to make sure I can ping that. If I can, great. And the lab even says, if you can, great. If you can do that right here, excellent, keep moving. If you can't, again, scroll to the end of the lab. I have a troubleshooting section here for you. After the link lights, here is I can't ping my gateway. Again, go back and check your cables. Go back and check IP subnet mask default gateway. Don't assume, do an IP config. Make sure these are right. Look for typos. It's really easy to make a typo. Mr. Brown does it all the time. It's going to happen to you too. So if you have a typo, go fix it. Okay. Once that's done, make sure like your wireless NIC on these PCs, our lab PCs, make sure, I'm going to go here to Network and Sharing Center. Go to Change Adapter Settings. Make sure your wireless NIC, disable that guy. Sometimes they get enabled, people enable them, and that can cause you to have ping issues. And make sure your Ethernet 3 is enabled, the Wi-Fi is disabled, if you will. Okay? Make sure that's done. Then try to ping your gateway. If it works, great, keep moving. If not, do a show run on your router. And this you would need to do on both routers. So do a show run on your router. Let me go here, show run. And I'm going to verify my ports are right. It's real easy to have a typo here. It's real easy to get them backwards. So go back to your map and verify. 00, is it this? 170.70.16.1. Good. 01, is it this? Good. If it's not, if you need to fix it, all you need to do is go back into that interface and plug in the new IP. It'll overwrite what's there. Okay? More times than not, that is going to work. So you can go back in the interface and just plug that in. Once you've done that, if you've done any changes, then try your ping test again. You should hopefully work. Okay? If not, then ask for help. Okay? If not, ask for help. And so I want to make sure I'm pinging my default gateway. Scrolling back up here. Scrolling back up here. Okay? I want to make sure I'm pinging my default gateway. So here's my workstation. I'm pinging my gateway. Excellent. And do that for the other PC as well. And then I'm going to try to ping between them. I'm going to try to ping across my network. Ping 170.70.48.10, I believe, is my other PC. And that should work. If we have everything configured right, that should work. And I have a successful ping. If I do not, again, at the end of the lab, I have some troubleshooting tips. Scroll back down here. Okay. Here is I can't ping across my WAN. So I go back, double check your workstation settings, double check your router settings, double check your routing protocol config. Okay. Since that's the new piece we just did. And again, after you make any of those changes, try your ping test again. If it's still not working, then ask for help. Okay. That way you can be a little bit self-sufficient in trying to maybe untangle an issue that maybe was caused when you were typing things in. So I'm trying to get all that functioning. Once I do, now I can start looking at my RIP configuration. So let's do that. I'm going to look at my RIP routing table now on my router, and I'm on my, looks like my 2811. Yep. So I'm going to do a show IP route. What I should be seeing is all three networks, and I do. I see the 32, the 48, and the 16. And if I look a little closer, I'm like, okay, look at the networks, how to reach them. So if I look at 32.0 is directly connected, and it even tells me what port. 16 says it's directly connected, it even says what port. The 48 is the one on the other router. It's on the 4221. It says, hey, if you want to reach there, I'll go out this port. I will go to this IP, which is the IP of the other router, which is one router away, and I will get there. So there is my how I get there, how I reach there. Here is the metric, one hop away. RIP uses a hop count. Routers away, it's one router away. And then here's my administrative distance, 120. That is the number associated with the routing protocol. Each routing protocol gets assigned as administrative distance. Basically, how good is this information? And the number goes from 0 to 255. 0 is excellent, 255 is horrible. So 120 is just slightly better than middle. So it's pretty good info. So there is my RIP routing table. I do want to save that. So I'll do a copy here. Control C. I'm going to open my notepad. And I will paste that in, and I'm going to save that. I will do File, Save As. I need to go to my 125 folder. And I'm going to call this RIP routing table.txt. And I'll save that so I have that for future. I do want you to cable into the other router and take a look at it. You'll see on the 4221 it gives you a little bit more info, but the same networks are there. Okay. You don't need to save both routing tables. I just need one saved. Okay. Now that we looked at the routing tables, let's look at some routing events. So on my router, I'm going to use what's called the debug command. I'm going to use the debug command. Now, I do need to be careful because I could turn on too much debugging, and it's going to be hard to use my router. I could bog it down too much. So I'm just going to be very specific and say debug IP RIP events. And this will now show through this console any RIP event that is leaving or entering the router. So I'm going to look for those, and what I'm going to look for is it's sending, building, and receiving information. I'm going to pause for a second while a couple of these roll by. All right, I waited about a minute, and I see receiving an update from a router. It's sending an update. Receiving up, sending an update, and probably here in a couple seconds I'll see her receiving another update. There we go. There's received another update. What I'm seeing is these are timed updates. It's sending and receiving on a timed basis. So RIP is doing that all day long. Adds a lot of overhead to your network. What I'm going to do is turn that off. On debug. Oh, there we go. Oh my goodness. Mr. Brown's having lots of trouble typing. There we go. That has turned that off. What I'm now going to do is let's look at some Wireshark packets of RIP. So I'm going to launch Wireshark. I'm going to make sure I'm using my Ethernet 3 here. Make sure I'm using my Ethernet 3 NIC. I'm going to launch that. I'm going to wait a minute for it to capture a couple. So I'm going to pause while it's doing that. All right, I've let that run a little bit. I will stop, and I'm going to put a filter in here for RIP. And I see a couple RIP packets have come through. What we want to do is open one of these and take a peek. So I'm going to double click. And I want to look at a couple things. I tell you in here to look at the source and destination addresses. If I look at the Ethernet header, the source is coming from my Cisco router, and the destination is a layer 2 broadcast. Yeah, this is broadcasting to everybody. Broadcasting to everybody. If I look at the IP header, I see the source is coming from the router, layer 3 broadcast to everybody. Yep, this is broadcasting all day long, which is one of the reasons networks don't use RIP anymore. Because of that broadcast nature. It's adding a lot of overhead, and it's really not very secure. Once you look at a couple of those, I do want you to save these packets, so we will do File Export Specified Packets. And I will give this a name. I'll go to 125 here, and I'll call this RIP Packet Capture. And I will save that. I'll leave it to the PCAPNG. And I will save that. Oh, I think I saved that to the right folder. Let me make sure I saved that to the right folder. Yeah, I did. 125. There we go. So now I have my RIP packet capture. And really, if I install Wireshark elsewhere, I can load that file and see all my RIP packets again. So I could open them again and view them again. There we go. There is working with my RIP. Next one, we're going to take that off and put the next routing protocol on.